I signed the first bill in the country on unmasking for federal agencies, for federal agents, which is also part of the discussion of whether or not we have a government shutdown. And I think it's an important one. I think they should take the masks off.
12 seconds later.
It's a California law, but the LAPD doesn't plan to enforce it.
Federal law enforcement officers are banned from wearing masks while on duty.
Yeah, Eyewitness News reporter Monica Deanda live in downtown L.A. with why the police department says the policy was not well thought out.
So over the past several months, you may have heard some of the rumblings that blue states were attempting to ban ICE agents from wearing masks or covering their faces. I believe Chicago attempted to make it a local ordinance. California even passed an entire state law designed to ban law enforcement from concealing their identities. Of course, we've seen absolutely no attempts to regulate or control the very left-wing terrorists that are the reason ICE started to cover their faces to begin with. But of course, what else do we expect from Democrats? Except there's just a few problems with this performative policy. And I think first and foremost, that's the fact that actually states have no authority over this. There's such a thing as federal supremacy, and no, states cannot just arbitrarily tell the federal government how the federal government can enforce federal law in their own state. You don't get to just nullify federal policy because you feel like it based on your own state law. Now, it would be one thing, for example, if blue states tried to take a lawsuit to court to argue that federal policy that ICE agents are enacting is a violation of existing federal law or it's unconstitutional because those are national documents and national laws. But no, you can't just basically tell ICE or the FBI or whatever, hey, we disagree with your law enforcement practice in our state, so therefore federal law doesn't exist here. Actually, that's pretty illegal. It's a greater example of the seditious behavior and insurrection that, California and many states are engaged in. But as you could probably expect, the implementation of this policy is not going so well, and that's what we'll explain for you here today. Because again, these states don't have authority or jurisdiction over this. I don't know how left-wing activists ever thought this was going to end. It was performative the entire time. Of course, the second question I have, after all, is what's wrong with wearing a mask? I thought that's meant to save lives, The ICE agents, they're just good citizens. They're just social distancing. Mask up to save lives, after all. That's what you told us, by the way, was permanent in America. You guys tried to make it a permanent policy. Hey, if you're sick, you should cover up your face. Okay, maybe the ICE agents are sick. How do you know that? They're probably exposing themselves to a lot of foreign diseases in the process of these ICE raids from people like all around the world. We don't even know where they're coming from. So, after all, what is the issue, Oh, can you believe these ICE agents are covering their faces? Yeah, like, you mean during COVID? You mean the policy that you tried to force on us at gunpoint? What's like, I don't know if these people actually realize what they're saying, but anyways, nonetheless, I want to bring you the update today out of California, because apparently not only is the new state law that's meant to be against ICE agents being challenged by the Trump administration in federal court, but even as we speak, in blue jurisdictions like Los Angeles, the LAPD is openly coming out and basically saying that we're not going to be enforcing the new mask ban on ICE agents, and essentially we don't even have the authority to do it, which is a pretty ironic turn. I wonder if, you're going to see calls once again to defund the police. Is Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass going to be pushing back against this? Or are they, as they're currently doing, by the way, just quietly admitting surrender? Because again, this policy was performative and fake the whole time. You never had authority over this. You still don't have authority over this, okay? Turns out, despite whatever these activists think in the streets, ICE are actually deputized federal law enforcement. The same authorities as, say, FBI or U.S. Marshals, okay? They're not just some random people you think it's okay to harass or impede. I've never seen any left-wing activists attempt to treat FBI agents or even local police officers in the same way they're treating ICE right now, because that shouldn't be a thing. It's illegal. If you impede ICE, you're impeding the same law enforcement and facing the same charges as anyone else, right? And then after all, again, federal supremacy here reigns supreme. But anyways, we'll talk about it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, before we delve into this issue and this update out of California, I would like to remind everyone the actual reason why ICE agents had to start covering their faces to begin with. And it is entirely a byproduct of left-wing behavior. So another example, as we so often see, of these people provoking situations, inciting the incident to begin with, and then complaining when, like, accountability, essentially, the logical response of what should happen in this situation is enacted upon them. And that's what leftists always do. Zero accountability.
Decided to post a video revealing the agent's address. She thought she would gain support and likes, but she unknowingly committed a serious crime. Under the law, publicly disclosing the personal information of a federal official is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. After the video was posted, many people criticized her, and facing immense online pressure,
their faces and posting them online with death threats to their family and themselves. So I'm sorry if people are offended by them wearing masks, but I'm not going to let my officers and agents go out there and put their lives on the line and their family on the line because people don't like what immigration enforcement is. They're wearing those masks because we ran an operation with the Secret Service where we arrested someone that was going online, taking their photos, posting their families, their kids' Instagram, their kids' Facebooks, and targeting them. So let me ask, is that the issue here, that we're just upset about the masks? Or is anyone upset with the fact that ICE officers' families were labeled terrorists?
It's about the identification, sir, because some of these agents don't have labels that say who they're with.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, when you ask the question, why does ICE have to cover their faces and why did that become policy? It's because of the fact that ever since the start of the Trump administration, we have seen what is essentially a domestic terrorist doxing campaign to figure out who ICE agents are, to target them, to target their families. We know for a fact this is not just in the realm of online threats because we've seen this behavior manifest itself in real life time and time again. Real people have been arrested for stalking. Real people have been arrested, by the way, for attempted cases of violence, even a few shootings in some cases, against ICE or Border Patrol agents. And by the way, it's a daily occurrence right now in Minneapolis. I would just like to remind everyone. Do we or do we not? Have we or have we not shown you the videos too, by the way, of mobs going around trying to find ICE agents, when they're off shift or whatever, identifying them. Hey, we think this person eating at a restaurant is an ICE agent. Let's swarm them. Let's violently break into the hotel we think they're staying at. Yeah, that's the very reason why, again, ICE decided, or the leaders of ICE, I should say, decided that it would be a good policy to hide these people's identity, not just for their own safety, if you want to make the argument, oh, but they signed up for that, but also the safety of their families, because we know for a fact people have been arrested over targeting the innocent families of people who simply work for ICE. That's the reason. Now, you could sit there and try to argue that, well, how come local police don't do that then? How come the FBI doesn't always do that? How come ICE didn't have to do this before? And the answer is very simple. Because not before have we seen this coordinated of, again, basically a domestic terrorist campaign to single out people who work for this specific law enforcement agency. Even at the height of Black Lives Matter, where there was a lot of tension with local police, you never saw it happening on this level. Now, I will concede to you, it's not an ideal situation. Yes, in a perfect world, for the sake of government transparency and everyone feeling like they can see and relate to what's happening, sure, I would very much like to see ICE agents not have to wear a mask. But again, it's not the Trump administration or conservatives who are to blame for that. It's the fact that leftists have no self-control. We've seen over the course of the Trump presidency, by the way, they're incredibly violent. They do it a lot, and it's a very real possibility that people have to be prepared for. And because of the fact that left-wingers will not stop doxing, harassing the families of, stalking, and even trying to outwardly commit violence and even murder ICE agents, is the very reason, folks, why they're being forced to cover their identity. I understand it's not an ideal situation. It's also not an ideal situation. The fact that anytime you go to a Target or CVS in many major cities of this country, all the products are locked up and you have to call the employee for assistance. Yeah, it really does suck overall on many levels to live in a low trust society. It sucks. It's not ideal that you can't board a public bus or a subway in this country without fearing for your life. But you know what? That is the result. That is the, of course, consequence of people who refuse to act like dignified or civilized individuals, right? They violate the trust that is necessary to build a democratic, free, or open society, and then complain when accountability comes for them. For example, right? When you keep on terrorizing ICE agents, breaking the law, trying to harass them and their families, and then ICE responds by saying, okay, we have to start hiding our identities because you guys are doing this, don't turn around and cry the victim about that and say, what, now ICE is hiding their identities.
You want to build trust? You want to build a sense of community again? This idea that we have a private police force that seems to have taken an oath of office to the president, not the Constitution. This paramilitary outfit scares the hell out of me, and I imagine scares the hell out of you, and sure as hell has communities on edge all across this country.
This all started because of the left, which, by the way, is the story of the entire ICE immigration debate in America to begin with, okay? Why was Trump elected, first of all, even on the mass deportation platform, before all of this? It's because you guys opened the border. Then secondly, why did these incidents happen in Minneapolis and even some other places around the country? Because you guys won't stop provoking ICE. Your politicians don't stop, inciting their supporters to go do this type of stuff and get themselves into dangerous situations. All of this, whether it's the immigration problem or ICE in our cities or whatever it is, all has been provoked, caused entirely by the left, okay? They keep pushing buttons, they keep poking that metaphorical bear, and then every single time, like the children they are, scream the victim and claim they're being persecuted and we have secret police now after you caused it all arguably intentionally, okay? And let me say too, by the way, there is a way to get ICE to stop wearing masks. It's actually very simple. You have to shut down the left-wing domestic terror networks, okay? It should be directly, not maybe a gray area. It should be directly a crime to dox these ICE agents, to impede them, to, be stalking them around in the streets, okay? That has to be a thing that happens, right? You need to shut down the left-wing network of domestic terrorism. And then potentially, when all these people are in jail and not around in normal society to be terrorizing ICE so constantly, then maybe it'd actually be fine, logistically speaking, for ICE to wear masks. But because of the fact that, arguably the administration or even our system as a whole, I really think it's the system as a whole, right, is kind of too soft on the issue of left-wing terrorism and how it all starts, then that's the moderate solution, actually, is ICE has to wear masks, right? Ideally, if you don't want them to wear masks, then stop engaging in the behavior. And if they're not going to stop, then start arresting people who engage in that behavior. But here we are where it's like the halfway solution where we're trying to say, okay, well, ICE operations have to continue and we can't just arrest all the leftists who are doing this. So let's try to cover our faces. But again, I say, right, why is this situation happening? Because of behavior entirely perpetrated by the left. Unironically, they are the greatest quote unquote threat to democracy because they always engage in behavior that tears down the sort of moral norms of a democratic society, such as law enforcement just wearing their faces and being publicly identifiable. Yeah, well, when you keep doing that to law enforcement, over time, things are going to get more intense. Over time, things get more quote-unquote authoritarian, if you want to call it that. So stop acting like lunatics. Stop acting like terrorists. It really is quite simple. But anyways, that said, let us now pivot to the latest update on the California law here, where Scott Wiener, that creep, tried to make it California state policy that ICE agents and law enforcement as a whole are no longer allowed to cover their faces, while of course providing absolutely no provisions for, hey, what's going to happen if, it results in the very terrorism that we've already seen in the streets. By the way, I have to ask the question too, by the way. So this law was basically designed to essentially ban law enforcement in general from wearing masks, which is why they tried to argue, oh, it's not just a ban on masks from ICE. But did they actually think this through, right? Because you can say whatever you want about ICE wearing masks, but does it mean now like a SWAT team is not allowed to wear a mask? Because that's pretty common, right? They have the whole SWAT helmet thing going on. Are riot squads not allowed to cover their faces? What happens when they have to deploy tear gas? Is the face shield also illegal? We don't have the answers to these questions. I don't know. Because as usual, it doesn't seem like a policy they thought out very well. But then again, the California state legislature never really does think, except what's happening now. Well, according to ABC7 here, it's a California law. Federal law enforcement officers are banned from wearing masks while on duty, but the Los Angeles Police Department doesn't plan to enforce it. Let's find out why.
The reality of one armed agency approaching another armed agency to create conflict over something that would be a misdemeanor at best or an infraction, it doesn't make any sense.
Chief McDonnell went on to say the state's federal mask ban is not a good public policy decision, adding in his opinion it was not well thought out due to the possibility of conflict between law enforcement agencies. The ban on face coverings, known as the No Secret Police Act, was introduced following immigration raids across Southern California that began last summer. The law went into effect on January 1st, but is not being enforced because the Department of Justice is currently challenging it in court. So far, the judge presiding over that case has indicated that the federal government has a strong argument that this could be discrimination against federal agents, since some California state law enforcement is exempt.
Oh, well, I guess we have the answer to that question. The policy quite conveniently states that some California law enforcement are exempt. Well, why is that? I thought covering your face if your law enforcement is completely authoritarian. It's fascist, it's Nazi. So California is operating a Gestapo by that logic, right? But anyways, that said, the LAPD chief here is correct. The policy is not well thought out. It's not well thought out on a number of levels. But he does also raise a very good point. What was the intention of Democrats even implementing it? I mean, first of all, as they point out, it is very likely, I should say, to get struck down in court because the state has no authority. But if the state, let's say, were to try to enforce it, so yeah, what's going to happen? So LAPD, an armed law enforcement agency operating at the state and local level, is going to approach armed federal law enforcement and try to arrest them. What's going to happen then, right? Is that the pretense for, let's say, civil war, armed insurrection, major chaos happening in the streets, right? Well, LAPD is basically saying, yeah, we don't want that. We're not going to do that. But was that the intent then of the California state legislature, right? I guess the answer has to be yes, because what were they going to do if ICE refused to follow the mask mandate, or the lack of mask mandate, I should say there, arguing that the state of California didn't have jurisdiction, right? You're literally going to get a constitutional and civil crisis, which I would argue we're already in, right? That is exactly what Democrats are already engaged in to begin with. But yeah, just another prime example of it. But anyways, that said, glad to see at the very least that California police will not be enforcing it. To be honest with you, that's exactly what I predicted to happen the whole time, right? I knew this was never going to go anywhere. But it does beg the question then to the state of California, what was the point of doing all of this? What was the point of implementing that legislation, having this fight for a very long time for a law that you knew likely was illegal, you knew it was completely unenforceable, but as an attempt to appease, I guess, your radical voter base of domestic terrorists, you just wanted to virtue signal essentially how much you're on their side? Was that the intent? Or was the intent, like I said, to cause some type of civil war in our streets? We don't know, but overall, and that's Democrats for you. What else can we say? So that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.